Thank you so much to Damien Moyes and to all of our participants in the last session. My name is Ron McLeod. I'm Renew Sustainable Housing Advocate, and I'll be popping in throughout the rest of the day to let you know what's coming up and provide some housekeeping. Before we head into the next session, I'd like to remind you that we'd love you to share a photo of where you're watching from today or your favourite moment from our sessions on social media. You can tag us on Facebook or Instagram with the hashtag SHD2021. Next up, we have a session on designing for accessibility and ageing in place, hosted by Clayton McDowell from the University of Wollongong.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're joining us from Western Australia. My name is Clayton McDowell, and I have the pleasure of being your MC for this session today on design for life, accessibility, and ageing in place. I hope you've all seen the acknowledgement to country that's been rolling throughout the day. I'm speaking to you from Darwin country today, and please feel free to share in the chat where you were joining us from. In this session, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from some amazing panel members about their inspiring homes, where they have placed a focus on designing not only for sustainability, but for accessibility and ageing in place. This is a topic that is dear to my heart, and I've spent the past few years working at the University of Wollongong Sustainable Buildings Research Centre, where during this time I was the project manager and student leader for Team UOW's Desert Rose House, which hopefully you can see in the background of me here today. This was a student-led project that designed and built a net zero energy home as part of the Solar to Castle Middle East 2018 competition. We also designed this house with a particular focus on ageing in place and improving the quality of life for people living with disabilities such as dementia. So similar to the previous sessions today, we're going to hear from each of the panelists first, where they'll have a couple of minutes to provide a brief introduction of their home. And following this, we'll have time for any questions that you may have for any of the panelists. So feel free to use the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen to ask any burning questions you may have, and we'll do our best to get through as many of these as we can. And make sure if you're asking a question of a particular panelist, just to put their name in the question. So our first panelist for this session is Loretta Murray with her generation home in Queensland. Loretta, do you want to please start us off by telling us a bit about your home?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Loretta, thanks.
Oh, great. Yeah, hi. My name is Loretta Murray. I live in Brisbane, Queensland. And this home was inspired really by looking after my father as he aged in my previous family home, which was a two-storied home with a pool. He eventually came to live with me, and it became apparent to me fairly quickly that this wasn't going to work as I grew older in my own circumstances now that I am on my own. So that's the story of this home. It's built on the land that my father left to me, so that's very important to me also.
Thanks, Loretta. And I love the connection that it has and all the reused materials that you've brought from the old home as well. I think it's great to be able to bring materials into a new life and give them new meaning as they continue on. And so if you haven't, for all those that are watching that haven't actually had a chance to jump online and have a look at these houses at the end of the session, I really do encourage you to look them out. Our next panelist is Helen Beazley with her Morven house in New South Wales. Please, Helen, can you introduce us to your home?
Good afternoon. I'm speaking to you from our very comfortable Morven home. We've only just occupied it for the past 12 months. I actually work as an occupational therapist, so through my experience of observing clients and our own families functioning in their homes, I've taken on board what might support them to live comfortably and safely and independently in their homes, and what things might impede their independence and safety in the home. So having that knowledge in mind when we were designing, my husband and I were designing and looking at building, we hope to have taken on board some of those observations and built a home that should support us to be safe and independent in the later stages of our lives. So things that we've done are we've got less rooms and bigger spaces. And we actually have a ramped access to the front door without looking like a ramp. And we have, we're threshold free at all doorways except the internal garage doorway. And so being on the downside of a slope, there was some reluctance to actually go threshold free into the garage. But there is adequate space there for a ramp to be installed if required in the future. And we've also built a laundry that has the appliances at a much more accessible level, so to alleviate bending and lifting. We also, in the bathroom, one observation that was very evident to me, particularly for latter stages of lives, our baths mainly collect dust. They're not actually used for anything but to collect dust. So to alleviate that, looked around and came up with a clawfoot bath, because they actually have a bit of a higher base as well, so can actually still step in and out of it and actually grip the sides. And then when the time comes that we can no longer access that, that can just be lifted out of the bathroom with little evidence that there was actually a bath there. And then that space can be used, you know, maybe taken up for other functions like attendant care or have a dressing chair or something to that effect as well. So I'll leave it at that point and let someone else take on and talk about their home now. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Helen. And I love the appliances at a right level as well, which is, you know, such a simple change, you think. And just even the photo up on your video about the washing machine being at a higher height with the little shelf that pops out for the washing basket. My own wife is also asking for one of these now. So I think we'll have to see about putting one of them in our own laundry here. Our next panelists are Lance and Jenni Banister-Jones with their Claremont Forever home in Western Australia. Lance or Jenni, can you both tell us a little bit more about your home?
Good afternoon. Yes, we're here in Perth, Western Australia, a little bit behind everyone else. The house is now a year or two old. We didn't, Jenni, my wife, is an ergonomist, so very conscious of ergonomics of the design. I have to say I wasn't, but our designer, Griff Boris, almost insisted upon having access and aging in place as a priority. And it's only with time that we've learned to appreciate the importance that he attributed to it. And now, unlike all our other friends, it is just a life in this home forever.
I'll just add to that in terms of aging in place, we live completely in the downstairs section, and the upstairs section is actually a completely self-contained unit where we have friends and family to stay, but in fact we could have a carer if we ever needed it in the future. A carer would be able to live in as well. They'd have a separate entrance, completely self-contained up here, which is where we are at the moment. And right down to the fact that everywhere up here is also wheelchair accessible, and we could actually have a chairlift up the stair rail if we needed it. But the things like the bathroom, it has already has the plumbing in place if somebody wanted to install a washing machine and a laundry sink. So literally all the appliance or the services are actually here and can be fitted out according to the need as we age.
Yeah, that's fantastic and very interesting. And yeah, it seems to be a bit more of a more common where there's separate units are also being built in amongst it to enable, visitors or carers. I know from Loretta's video as well that she has a separate space. And we're about to hear from our final panelist, Jenni Wetselaar, as well, with her backyard retirement, which is also an extra space separate from the main home, which a lot of thought's been gone into this home as well. To make it more age friendly, but she's also turned her hand to making the main house on the property a bit more age friendly as well. So Jenni, can you tell us a little bit more about your home?
I built my home 4 years ago, and I had a very short budget, and watched every episode of Grand Designs, as everyone does, and I had some real needs for this being my only home, so that as the others have mentioned, there are no thresholds, the shower is wheel in. I put the toilet in the laundry, so there was lots of space for the carer to help me transfer in the end. And may never use a lot of the things that I have built into the home, but it's so much cheaper to reinforce the wall next to the toilet for the grab rails when you're building a home than retrofitting it afterwards. And then I had the real pleasure of being able to adapt the old ex-govie in front of my house for my sister to care for my mother with dementia. So some of the learnings that I had from building my home, I incorporated into that home.
I think we're just losing a little there, Jenni.
And made it a three-way slide. And as we go into the joint discussion, I'll put in the chat section the standards and the tools that I use and guidelines that government and industry have produced in conjunction with communities to what's and accessibility in homes.
Thanks, Jenni. I'm not sure whether it was my internet connection. I lost just a small piece of a couple of things there, but I'm sure it'll all come out in the chat function anyway. So it's really interesting. I've seen like a lot of panels here. You've mentioned thresholds. I'm just curious, and this is really open to any of the panel members, whether you were able to get smooth thresholds at any of the entrances to the actual house. Because I know when we built our Desert Rose, we actually ended up having to work with a local joinery company here to actually design flat thresholds for all of our external doors, just because we couldn't find any that were available, especially with we had triple glazed glass in some of our sliding doors. So did anyone manage to get that off the shelf by anyone?
Hello, it's Helen. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we've got you, Helen.
Okay, thank you. We actually, we've recessed a triple panel sliding door, external door. I guess in hindsight, if anyone's considering this in the future, it's beautiful, it's flush. Screening of that door is a bit of a problem. And also it's a standard height door. So I'd recommend having a custom built door just to retain the height. So by actually recessing it into the floor, that's lowered the height of the door.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is doable. And with the bathroom, it's just a matter of planning the floor level before you actually, and knowing what you're going to finish your floors with. But I did insist on 200 mil tiles, which was a bit of a challenge because there's so many 300 and larger tiles. But my point there was, from my experience with home modifications, is that the less joins and things you have in the tile, or the smaller tiles, allow you to get the fall on the floor. So if you're going to have larger tiles, you're going to end up cutting them anyway to get the floor floor level and all the or the fall for the water when you don't have a threshold at the door. So yeah, that was an advantage I found, and I think it looks, even though it's not, you know, aesthetically the latest look, I think it looks quite smart, and so that's just something to bear in mind as well, learning that I'd share.
That's great. So you just took a normal door and sunk it down lower, which is yeah, we didn't think of that. we just built custom doors, but ours were made out of recycled hardwood, so they came out beautiful as well. Jenni, did you have something to add there? It looked like you were.
Yeah, I couldn't afford to have double glazing in my entrance doors, and it was non-negotiable to have no threshold into the house. So I built a small airlock at the front. So I had a standard wooden door, glass, low E glass, and I have, for the very cold and the very hot days, I have a small airlock entrance hall that is the same functionality as double glazing, and that got me round very cheaply, having to encounter getting the builders to do exactly what I wanted with a double glazed door. I just couldn't afford the commercial double glazing that would have given me a threshold-free section. And you're right, Helen, but I negotiated about the small tiles in the bathroom. I had large tiles in the bathroom because I don't like to clean, and grout means mold to me. So I just had to negotiate with them when they were pouring the slab that the hobbler shower recess would have the fall poured into the concrete pour and lay the big tiles on top of it.
Yeah, that's quite smart. We've got a bunch of questions flowing in here now, so I'm going to try and dive into them, and some of them are a bit more directed, some a bit more open for discussion. There's a bit of discussion happening around benchtop heights and accessibility specs for that. So looking for ideas about how to alter kitchen benchtop heights, knee space underneath later in life, and having access to the top cabinets as well from a wheelchair. Did any of you at all consider that whilst you were designing?
Once again, with the cabinet heights above bench storage, I specifically, we've got higher, longer, what would you say? Yeah, more bulkhead, I guess, because I just couldn't see the point in having the cabinetry going up to the standard height because of not being able, or having to climb on something to reach it. So, and also then I actually asked for some of the cupboards to have additional shelving so I could bring the, you know, the top shelf down and make better use of the space in those overhead cupboards as well. In terms of the bench heights, yeah, that's an interesting observation. I guess, you know, with the technology now, how we have the option for height adjustable with actuators. But certainly I haven't incorporated any of that into our home. Just, I guess, using the drawers, we've found that to be very, very beneficial. Yeah. So yeah, there's no, I guess it's not an ideal adaptable home, but you know, as lots of the discussion has said, it's what you can do with what you've got, the resources you've got.
Yeah, I think that's a really great summary. We actually looked into it for the Desert Rose house as well. And again, it came down to budget. I know I'm over 6 foot tall and I love to cook. And I've got size 13 feet, which actually means I can't actually stand very close to a kitchen benchtop, and I'm always crouched over, and it's one of the most painful activities for me. And I always wanted to get a adjustable benchtop because my wife is about a foot shorter than me. So there's a bit of a height difference when we come to cooking, but that was my dream. But one thing we did look into at the Desert Rose was cupboards that would actually come down to you from up top. And really designing to be able to have removable cupboards underneath. We didn't install that kitchen in the end, but we did design for it for the future. And the idea to be able to pop cabinets out and put them in the garage, I guess, and then, you know, if the next occupants wanted to pop them back in, then so be it.
I did it with my bathroom. I did a wall hung cabinet in my bathroom so that if I was in a wheelchair, I'd be able to clean my teeth and lean over into the basin. So I couldn't justify the expense to do it in the kitchen, and I'll let someone else cook for me if I get to that stage. And I find the majority of my overhead cupboards are full of things that I probably don't need anyway. So maybe the executor will get rid of everything that's in the overhead cupboards that I can't reach.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the other comment I'd just like to make, because there was a trend around lift up cupboard, upper cupboard, you know, above bench storage cupboards having a lift up style door. Well, from my observations, many older people have shoulder problems. So, you know, they'd be just left open all the time. So, you know, that's another consideration, I think, is just having a hinge door to alleviate that extended reach.
Can I just jump in with a comment?
Of course, yes.
There are really good Australian standards for particularly kitchen design for people in wheelchairs. And that's, if somebody is thinking of designing a kitchen with that in mind, that's really the go-to place for it. We didn't consider it here because we were, well, we're both sort of fully fit certainly at the moment. And it was more a case of doing the type of thing that you were needing as a 6 foot plus person, making sure that the bench top heights were at hip height for myself and Lance, so that we weren't bending over while we were cooking or stirring or things like that. Reach things, where we put things in the kitchen so that we didn't have to walk from one end to the other to get something and then walk all the way back again. We didn't actually have any design features for wheelchair access, but they are certainly out there in the Australian standard.
Yeah, definitely. And what we found really useful was the Living Housing Association guidelines, and they've got a wonderful resources that are freely available on their website, and that's what we used a lot to guide us. We're joined on the panel here by a couple of people working in nursing and occupational therapists, so it's kind of interesting trend of, you know, the type of fields that have been drawn into this sort of conversation here. So that's great. There's one of the other questions here was around heavy doors and the experience of you know, elderly people opening and closing triple glazed doors as they're much heavier. Does Loretta or Lance and Jenni there, do you have any of the doors that are quite heavy, or have you managed those?
Well, I suppose living in Queensland, I don't have those kinds of issues. So no, I don't have those kinds of issues. I have much the same issues, I suppose, other than that, than pretty much everybody else does.
Yeah, what about you, Jenni or Helen?
Yes, I must add that was a learning from our experiences. We've got this double glazed panel slider. So in hindsight, it's going to be too heavy in the future. So I'm going to have to look at getting it mechanized, I would suggest. But yeah, definitely aesthetically, sure, the panels look nice, but yeah, functionally, I'd recommend, if anyone's going that way, to look at least at a 4 or 5 panel slider.
Lance, do you have something there? Sorry.
Yes, no, like Queensland, WA, we don't have a requirement for, certainly in Perth, for double glazing. So all our doors work really well. And one thing that I find really useful are the locks. So having digital locks, meaning I'm not trying to find the keys or whatever, that's been a real bonus. So I highly recommend digital locks with fobs, and if needed.
Yeah, interesting point. Yeah, and I guess they're becoming a lot more accessible now as well. They're a lot more available on the market. In terms of weight, the way we kind of handled it as well was top hung doors. We found they helped take just seem to move a lot better. I don't know whether that's just that's not really a true statement or not, but that's what we kind of had in our experience as well. There's a couple of really good ones here, questions around budget. And there's a group here in their 30s with a young family, but they want to like to build with an aging and disability in mind. However, they've got a small budget. So they were asking whether anyone could estimate how much your budget increased to cater for the accessibility requirements. Anyone able to jump in on that?
Nothing. Mine cost me nothing because I designed the perfect home. And even though I had told the builder I only had 250,000 for this 90 square secondary residence, they did this lovely design for 365,000 that had all beautiful things, clerestory windows, or everything that opened and shut, but I couldn't afford it. So I just got my rubber and took it all the way back to what I actually needed. And I made sure that everything for the accessibility was built out of standard building materials. So the 3 pocket doors, recessed sliding doors that I put into between the 2 bedrooms and the hallway are just bog standard Bunnings sliding doors, but because of the configuration that I fought the builder and the carpenter to get them to do, I now have 1.5 times the door space that a standard door would give me. I had them build the ramp up to the door, a standard door, but then I made a small airlock for it. So my house didn't cost anything extra other than just putting the effort into thinking about it. And it was a gift that I didn't have enough money, because I've ended up with this fabulous home with a minimum of anything in it, and that's going to suit me very well for a long time. And it's 5 years old now, and I'd build it again exactly the same.
That's fantastic. I see, Loretta, you got your hand up. Do you have something you want to throw in here as well?
Yeah, just a small point, digressing slightly, and I'm appalling with numbers, and I can't quote you anything, neither can I give you a budget. But what I will say above and beyond all of that is it's probably worthwhile paying a little bit extra in the early stages to get things like 3-phase power, and to make sure you have good solar passivity in your home, so that you are not paying a fortune as you get older to heat and cool, and so that you've also got wiring precipitant to things like electric vehicles. Not that you need 3-phase for electric vehicles, but just thinking ahead in those terms, it's a lot cheaper to wire homes in the building stage or in the early stages than it is to try and retrofit. So to kind of think ahead, accessibility is very important, and I agree with absolutely everybody else. But I also have a keen focus on the affordability of the future and being able to live without having to pay a fortune for power and all of those sorts of things, or to have to retrofit the things in our future that we may need, like electric vehicles.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, was it Jenny you mentioned earlier about having the, or Helen, the strong points in the bathrooms for the grab rails in the future. We did the same with the Desert Rose. We put an extra noggin at a handrail height in every single wall in the house. We saw that as a pretty low cost to make sure that we had, you know, the strong points in the right place whenever a handrail could be fitted in the future. Helen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to isolate the cost of the accessibility that we've incorporated in our home, because as Loretta said, we've also got solar on board, and we also are off grid for water. We can be off grid for water. So that's adding to, you know, there's a cost there because it's not conventional build. But we hope over the, you know, the lifespan of the building and what it's going to give us into the future, that cost is going to be, you know, negligible. Yeah, but I mean, you know, when you're looking at, we've got 850 to 950 width doorways, of course, there's going to be a cost associated with that. But once again, as I said earlier, we've got less rooms. So we've put the money that you might put into a larger footprint, more rooms into those features to support us to be independent and to make the home more accessible and sustainable as well.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's sometimes it's our most asked question on the Desert Rose as well. How do you unpack some of those costs when you put in so many innovations in at once? It's not just sustainability, it's all of the aging in place. And there's a really good question here about whether anyone could recommend any books for beginners looking at age in place. Like, I know it's kind of cheating in some way because we have some nurses and occupational therapists here, so we'd have a lot of on-the-job training. But I know for us, the way we kind of handled it wasn't just through research, but we actually did a day in the life of activity where we looked at all the things that we do normally in a day, but then we also did one for what's a day in the life when we're older and what sort of activities might change or how they might be difficult. How did each of you kind of go about that process of, discovering what you wanted to include? Anyone want to jump us off?
As Jenni mentioned earlier, there are Australian standards. There's also, Living Homes Australia as well has a free resource that you can, where there's, of course, there's a cost associated with standards. Also bearing in mind, I stand to be corrected, but the standards generally are addressing a population between 18 and 65-year-old. So, it's not always applicable. I mean, it can be used as a starting point, but it's not always applicable to the broader population. And but it is a starting point. But once again, and I guess I have some bias as an occupational therapist, but it's understanding the function and the individual's needs as well. Yeah. And observation, that's just when you're visiting people out in the community, public facilities, what works, what doesn't. There's lots of evidence of what doesn't work.
That's great advice. Yeah, absolutely. Jenni, you look
when I adapted the old ex-govy that was on site for my mother's dementia care and then for my sister to eventually live in, I found a fabulous tool that's called A Way to Stay Home Modification Assessment and Planning Tool. And it was a document where I could ask my sister questions about what was really bad about her home so that I could then look at, yes, the livability guidelines that the government and industry have produced, but also the other things that if I was taking 5 walls out of this house, what could I do to help her? And it was very good guided questions that made her think about her eventual living. She was 65 already and reasonably able-bodied, but it made a difference to the outcome of what we got in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Lance, Jenni, or Loretta, do you have anything you want to add to this as well?
I just have a comment on that. In that we've designed and built. It's a new home, but I guess we had a slightly unusual brief to the designer. Lance wanted it to be viable as a home for 100 years, so that it's solid. It doesn't have to be knocked down and have all the wasted energy, etc. But also it had to be, from my point of view, I wanted to have a connection with the street. We have a quiet street. We have lovely neighbours. We have a big garden that is open to the street as well. So we have a lot of connection with the people in our neighbourhood. So we wanted to have just things like, where do we place the kitchen? Okay, let's have a kitchen overlooking the street. It's had some really unintended benefits, and that our neighbours down the road had a 2-year-old who kept escaping. And I just happened to be making lunch one day, looked out, and there he was just setting off down the road, and I could alert them. So that wasn't why we had it done. But so I think for people designing new homes, think about what you do in your normal day, what you want. I wanted lots of light. Sort of go for those things and then work with the designer as to how you can actually do it. So ours is a very simple home. It's nothing at all fancy about it, but it is a very good passive solar home. It works well, and it's great. It's really lived up to our expectations.
Yeah, fantastic. What about you, Loretta? What guidelines or advice did you grab?
Oh, well, again, I'm a registered nurse, or was a registered nurse. However, I worked in operating theatres, so I don't know what bearing that has on anything, but I did look after my father. So I had certain things that the others have actually covered anyway, in terms of how I designed the house, in terms of ageing. I suppose for me also, I was very cognizant of the fact that I didn't want to be cleaning, bending, lifting, climbing up on things. So I've kept it fairly streamlined. I don't have a loft that's high. I have my cupboards raised so that I can get a vacuum underneath it quite readily. I don't have to get down on my hands and knees. I suppose a point of difference for me is I have been, with the current climate in the world, financially and otherwise, been concerned about how I will economically survive into the future. So I built a studio apartment at the end of my property, so that it's a place for me should I need to go there. But it also can provide a passive income. So I suppose that's a point of difference potentially to the others. But I agree with what everyone else has had to say. Absolutely.
I've got a really and that's all fantastic discussion. We've had a really interesting question come through that I think is kind of straight to the point and maybe a little political in some ways. It says it's not really a question, but I'm witnessing my father's aging needs right now. He's 84 and we adapt his house as his needs change. My family house, we are setting things up for the future aging of us. So should all homes be built with aging in mind?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because all the things that make life easy for an old folk makes it easier for a young mother with a pram. If you can walk from your car without a threshold, push it into the lounge room, push it into their bedroom, it's exactly the same advantage as the funeral director coming out from the street all the way up to the side of the bed. It's a no-brainer.
Loretta, you've got your hand up there? Oh, we might jump to Helen whilst Loretta gets her connection back.
Yeah, I have to agree as well. And the removalists and when you're getting deliveries, when they can just wheel their trolley straight in, it's, what works for older people. It should be a minimum standard. Yeah, and I think just because of the sustainability of home, in the broader sense, it means it's offering that home to a broader range of the community. And I also just wanted to commend Jenni on reminding us about the social connectivity as well, because the research shows that, especially for older people, there is a lot of social isolation, and having that social connection incorporated into the design of the home is another. We shouldn't just be looking at the physical, we need to look at the social environment as well. So thanks for that reminder. Jenni?
Oh, well said. Loretta, you got audio there?
Yeah, I think so. I suppose my perspective on this is you don't need a massive home from the get-go. I had a large family. I had 4 children and thought I needed a big home and thought I needed all of the bits and pieces. In fact, it's kind of counterproductive to do so in so many ways. I think if there's one thing I can enforce to people, or reinforce, is that you don't need bigger to be better, from a number of perspectives, practically, economically, and moving forward into your future as well. It was the one thing that was painfully obvious to me as I moved my father into my 2-story 4-bedroom family home with a rumpus room and pool and all the rest it absolutely was counterintuitive to have all of those things.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with all of your comments, really. When we were designing the Desert Rose, we focused on dementia, which was quite difficult. And we spent a bit of time with Professor Richard Fleming, who was at the time leading up dementia training in Australia. And one thing he kind of said to us was, you know, if everything in our society was built to be dementia friendly, like all the shopping centers and everything, no one would ever get lost. And that's kind of like what we built the Desert Rose to be adaptable. You know, it's just good design. And if it was a business, you wouldn't design your business to not accept a wheelchair because you're losing a whole chunk of your business. It's just good practice. I'd love to see every house with this sort of thought put into it. Absolutely. There's one thing here around some of the stories and layout and double-story homes. We've got two, I believe both Helen and Lance and Jenny, your homes are both 2 stories. Is that right? How do you go about the thoughts of the lifts and that sort of accessibility, as well as there's someone actually asking Jenny if floor plans for your house are available as well, and whether you're happy to share.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, when this house was designed, the stipulation by the designer was that any the stairs, we couldn't have spiral stairs or anything like that because you could not fit a chairlift on it. So the design that we have is just straight stairs going up and a stainless steel it's called banister railing that would actually take the weight of a chairlift if it was needed. And then again, the design upstairs is the same downstairs in that it's all the doorways are wide enough for wheelchairs, prams, pushes, everything. There's no step into the shower. It's all beveled floor tiles. So it's the same basically as downstairs. But yes, certainly upstairs is completely accessible to anybody with that chairlift, which can be fitted.
And Helen, how about yourself?
So because we're on the downside slope, so the main house is the more accessible to the street. And then we do have what we call a utility area downstairs, but it's secondary to our main living area. But we have made provision for an internal lift because they're becoming more affordable these days as well. So just into the floor, we've had it set out so that could be, and provision in our front entry for where that could be put in place, because I had a client who actually converted her pantry into an internal lift so that, and so that gave me the idea that, as part of that, looking forward and planning for aging in place or accessibility, having that provision. So the home, we could live on the one level with a small section of garden between the home and the street, or if we're able to and need to, well, we can extend our living by having that lift included in the future and using the broader property. But also I just I guess part of as Loretta said, is a bigger home, maybe having a bigger family home initially, but having provision, as Lance and Jenny have done, to have a home that can adapt to either a carer accommodation or visitor accommodation, or even as a secondary dwelling. So having a dual occupancy as well. So maybe that's the way we should be looking at family homes as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And there's a bit on the videos as well around that. There's just a quick terminology. Someone's asked, what's the threshold? It's just a lip at the bottom of your door, really. So if you look at any of your external doors, you'll see a bit of timber or something. It's normally for weatherproofing, essentially, but it makes it a little bit difficult, or if you're on a wheelchair or a walker, or can be a trip hazard. I think we've all caught our foot on, a sliding door threshold at some point in our lives. Or little kids, you can see them often grab it. There's actually, whilst you're on the screen here, Helen, there's a bit of discussion here around your bath as well. And there's actually a lot of discussion around baths in general. So one was, why did you even retain the bath even temporarily? They're saying that they haven't used it in a long time, but someone else is saying that they felt that a tiled one gave you a bit of a seat on the edge of the bath to help you get in and out, which was a bit easier. So yeah, a little bit on baths.
Well, we still use a bath and we can still use it. So as I said, having that claw foot bath, actually, it has a bit of it's higher than a conventional built-in bath generally. It's accessible to clean around, you know. I don't like there's some of those more modern baths that actually have hidden nooks and crannies, difficult to clean. So, you know, you can easily get the mop in underneath it. Yeah, so but basically enjoy a bath, so we want to be still able to use it.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to what we were discussing earlier about activities, like just going through and what do you do every day? If you're still having baths, then, you know, maybe you want to put a bath in still. I love my baths personally, and I think I'll keep mine for as long as I can as well. There's just a few here around the kitchen as well. There's actually a fair bit around, you know, having the accessibility, which we discussed a little bit before, but then there was some on materials and whether there's anything suitable that you would recommend for having it next to the oven to be able to transfer hot pots or materials from. If any thought went into that about really how do you get your food out of the microwave or the oven onto the benches?
Yeah, we did quite a lot of work on the kitchen. We went through it in detail as to how we got from, you know, we're opening the fridge, which way does the fridge door open? Is there some way that you can take things out of the fridge and put them straight on right next to the fridge where you need it? Taking things out of the oven and the microwave. We actually had in a previous house a complete stainless steel workbench which incorporated the kitchen sink. And we actually put that we then actually incorporated this into this design. And so the oven and the microwave actually are adjacent to the stainless steel workbench, and things can come straight out of that and we can just plonk them straight down. The kettle sits on that section as well. And yeah, and otherwise we've used stone. Otherwise, anyway, basically pretty much engineered stone, and that we can put hot things on as well, so we don't actually have any issues there.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Does anyone else, like, kitchen's a hot topic? I think there's some here around the handles and everything around lever handles. I know like some people are saying that they don't use them or don't like them as they catch on stuff. But there's a specific Helen. Do you use lever handles in your kitchen?
Yeah, I went for the more of a fuller handle rather than just knobs and things, so that it means that if the time comes and the hands are got arthritic or whatever, it doesn't, you know, I don't need a fine grip. I can use more of a gross grip to pull the drawers out and things like that. That was something I looked at. In terms, I had a microwave in the past, which was really good because it actually had a drop down door, and I haven't seen any lately, but it meant that you could bring the hot item out to there, and if you need to stir or add ingredients, you didn't actually then have to lift it away from the microwave. So I think in the future, when I'm looking for a replacement, I'll have a look at that again, because that's something I've noticed that I've missed. And I don't have a pantry either, so as such. I've actually got drawers and some shelves, but yeah, I chose to have mainly drawers because another thing, I didn't feel it was necessary to have a walk-in pantry as such, because once again, it's just, you know, you tend to stuff gets lost in there basically. So a bit about decluttering as well and managing that. Once again, I have the engineered stone. I did look at having, I did see someone had suggested about having like a split levels in the kitchen for, you know, rather than sitting on a high stool as you get older at a breakfast bar, than having a chair. But I was a bit challenged around that, but I have seen a kitchen more recently where that's in place, and I really do think that's a good solution as well, worth considering.
Loretta, you look like you were ready to chime in there with something as well.
Not in particular. I just had a quick thought. I had bought a benchtop oven primarily actually for use in the studio apartment, but I currently have it in the main house, and I find it's very useful, particularly living on my own, to use it. It's right on the benchtop. You can put it in. It cooks very quickly. It uses minimal power, and it's very easy to take a plate out or a bowl out and put it on the bench beside you. It's just a thought.
And we're almost out of time. So I want to finish with one question that kind of ties everything together. Before we get there, there was one more question around wardrobes. Did anyone put any thought into their wardrobes when they were designing the build?
Absolutely. My wardrobes have no threshold on the floor, so I can push heavy items into it, adjustable shelving, and the door goes the entire way to the roof. So the west face of my 2 bedrooms, the west face of the house, is insulated by my wardrobes, additional insulation, and it just means I can have large roll-in containers with storage, low if for lesser used items, mid storage for the things you use all the time, and the upper level storage is fully exposed. You don't have to be struggling to push things into the wardrobes. And it cost me a little more, and it cost me a lot of emotional energy to get them to do it for me, but I don't regret it at all. Wonderful. No sliding doors for me on the wardrobes. I want to be able to walk the whole way in if I need to.
That's great. Did
I
anyone
have
else?
to agree that similar for well, particularly in the main bedroom.
Yes.
No, there's actually no doors, no thresholds. Yeah. Just keep it simple and accessible.
If I can just give a different perspective again on wardrobes altogether, if that's okay, I've actually put my fuse box in my wardrobe so that if anything happens, I can I can switch my circuits on and off from within my wardrobe.
Yeah.
So with the new homes, the way they're wired, it's all done remotely in their reading of the meters anyway. But I've put my security system and I've put my my fuse box, if you like, or my circuit breaker box, my power box, inside my wardrobe, so that I don't have to fumble around in the dark and worry about that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we're almost up on this session, and I was hoping that each of you could give a sentence or two on what piece of advice you would give to our audience members who might be thinking of making their home more accessible or aging in place friendly. So we might go in order that we introduced. So just a quick sentence or two. What advice, if you could give at all, to anyone that's ready to try and get into this? So Loretta, what's piece of advice would you have?
I suppose the biggest or the best piece of advice I can pass on is to investigate, to educate yourself, and to read as much as you humanly can. Know what you're doing or have a fair idea what you want or what you need, and then investigate it. See if it's possible. So much is available on Google. I spent many, many long nights reading anything and everything I could get my hands on. The key to everything is knowledge.
That's great. Yes. Helen, how about yourself?
Well, just in reflection, and particularly from the conversation, I think it's all been said before, but yeah, I was going to say stand by your guns, but be true to your values, and possibly with the younger families thinking about, well, how can this home be adaptable for future needs? So I think that, and think beyond just aging as well. Just think across the lifespan, basically. Yeah.
Lance and Jenni, do you have?
I think in summary, I guess the moral of our lesson was that to listen to the experts. The designer and the builders have done it so many times before. It was invaluable to listen to them. And it's only as we get older we learn to appreciate what they've done for us. Yep.
And how about you, Jenni?
I would build your home as if you never want to clean ever again. So not having a shower curtain or a shower glass has liberated me. So make it all simple and neutral decorating, and it'll last you forever.
That's all good advice from everyone. This has been a fantastic session. I've really enjoyed it myself. I wanted to give a big thank you to all of our panel members for sharing their experiences and inspiring us with their homes. This concludes the session. So thank you all who have tuned in for this, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's sessions coming up after this short break. If you haven't yet had the chance to check out a bit more information about everyone's homes, jump online. The links are there through the sessions, and you can see a bit more about these homes explained in little videos as well. So thank you all so very much for tuning in, and thanks again to the panel members. I hope you have a lovely day.